Good evening, everyone. I'm Archit Chaudhry. Thanks for joining us. This is WION, World is One News. The time now is 10:30 in the morning in New York, 3:30 in the afternoon in London, 4:30 p.m. in Cairo, and 8 p.m. here in New Delhi. Tonight, we're going to focus on India's GDP. Nope, not the economy, but politics. Our global Desi politicians. What impacts are they making around the world? What are their challenges in implementing policies, especially from a South Asian perspective? All of this, of course, comes on the brinks of Indian origin Leo Varadkar. He is now formally taken over as the Prime Minister of Ireland. So what is this important? Why is this significant? Well, Varadkar, he holds more than just that title. He is the country's first openly gay Prime Minister, the first of Indian descent, as well as the youngest person in that country to hold the position of Prime Minister. Varadkar's election in Parliament comes just 10 days after he succeeded Enda Kenny as the leader of the governing Fine Gael party. Varadkar says his election shows that prejudice has no place in Ireland. So a very interesting perspective when it comes to Varadkar. All right, let's now go to our guests joining us for this discussion. We have Mandy Clark, our bureau chief, joining us from London, as well as Julie Joseph, a journalist from Dublin. All right, let's go to Julie first. Julie, certainly a historic election there. What's the mood like there with the first, not only the first openly gay prime minister, but also one of the youngest there? What's the mood like there?
It is indeed. It's happened for the first time in the history of Ireland that we have a Taoiseach. Taoiseach is a title is the title of Prime Minister. This is how we call a Prime Minister here. He's the first Taoiseach to be elected who's not only the youngest at the age of 38, but also gay. And he comes from an immigrant family. His father was born in Mumbai, and he married a nurse in here. And that signals that Ireland has decided to become a country that is more liberal, more modernized, and who wants to offer equal opportunities and equal rights to all, whether from here or from outside. So being an immigrant, myself, I come from India. I was born in Delhi, and I'm studying here at NYG, and I'm turning with RTA now. I'm quite excited. I want to see how things shape up for us, for the minorities, and for students who come here to make big, to have their careers started, how things shape up for us and how better it goes for us.
Now go to WION's London bureau chief, Mandy Clark, also standing by. Mandy, this is historic in more ways than one. The fact that we have one of the youngest prime ministers in a very Catholic-dominated country, the fact that this is really sort of paving the way, sort of setting a precedence.
Yeah, Ireland was, famously ruled by Britain for 800 years. It became its own republic, and it has been predominantly Catholic and holding on to those traditional Catholic values. I had spent a few years in Ireland as a reporter, and even on the streets of Ireland, you notice people still cross themselves as they pass a Catholic church. But the younger generation, that staunch Catholicism has been dissipating, and you're starting to see a more outward-looking, thrusting Ireland. And I think his taking over this Taoiseach, this prime ministership, really shows Ireland on the front stage, trying to lead the way. And it's the Irish people. It's a great signal. And he's been described. I talked to one Irish journalist as he's a rock star when it comes to politics. He's really well liked, he's well received, and all the other issues that you would have expected to come from a more traditional Catholic country, like that he's gay and not necessarily fully Irish background, hasn't played a factor.
All right, we also want to introduce one more guest tonight into our conversation about India's GDP. Joining me in the studio here in New Delhi is Dilip Cherian. He's also known as the image guru. So let's talk about this. What image does this personify for Ireland?
I think it personifies a huge signal for globalization. While it may seem that this is a great thing for India, the fact is that it really is a big win for countries like Ireland to show that they are home to many cultures, that they're welcoming of whatever people achieve in their own right, and that there is no glass ceiling. And I think that has huge implications for investment, for business into Ireland, and for immigrants into Ireland. And no country can expect to do better than to have a person like this heading the country's politics.
And I also want to bring up this point about what is going on in Europe, specifically in the UK, with the turmoil of Brexit and all that is going on. And then you sort of see this breath of fresh air, if you'd like to call it, to see someone, especially an immigrant, the son of immigrant parents, and also someone who's young to hold that position, but also someone who's openly gay as well. So really tapping into many different minority groups, if you'd like to call it.
This is something that finds echo with the kind of young audiences and the young voters who are the future of any country in the world. Whether it's India, whether it's Ireland, the young actually are breaking down a whole bunch of old barriers. They may be creating barriers of their own, but the old barriers no longer matter. And barriers in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of country of origin, and also in terms of age. Because there is, unfortunately, ageism in much of the world. The conventional democratic structures respect age, and that kind of ageism results in too much of control by just one set of people. And this is an important change for a country like Ireland, and a very good signal for India, which is the world's youngest country now.
All right. Well, again, as we are talking about the big discussion about India's GDP, the Global Desi Politician, or we're talking, of course, about Ireland. Let's get some perspective about this man. He's 38 years old, Leo Varadkar, Ireland's newest prime minister, taking office just yesterday. As we mentioned, also the first openly gay prime minister, the youngest person to hold such a post. Let's take a look back at how he got to the highest position.
To build in Ireland a republic of opportunity, one in which every individual is given the opportunity.
Leo Varadkar officially took the Prime Minister's seat on Wednesday, becoming the first gay Prime Minister of the Catholic country. He's inherited Europe's fastest-growing economy and will face many challenges as Britain exits the EU, as well as a political crisis in Northern Ireland and a housing crisis at home. Varadkar took over from Enda Kenny as the leader of the Fine Gael party. The son of an Indian doctor and an Irish nurse, Varadkar's rise is significant in many ways. He is the country's first Indian origin Prime Minister, the youngest Prime Minister at just 38 years old, and the first gay leader to hold the post in the conservative country. It also marks a new high for persons of Indian origin who have been in high office in places such as Fiji, Mauritius, Guyana, Portugal, Suriname, and Singapore, to name a few. Let's take a look at the long road that Varadkar had to walk to the seat of the Prime Minister's office. Varadkar was born on the 18th of January 1979 in Dublin. His father Ashok, a doctor hailing from Mumbai, met his mother Miriam, an Irish nurse, while they were both working in Berkshire. They settled in Ireland in the 1970s. He became a councillor when he was just 24. He was elected to the Irish Parliament in 2007, made Minister of Transport, Tourism and Sport in 2011. In 2014, he was appointed the Minister of Health. He became the Minister of Social Protection in 2016. And last May, following the resignation of Enda Kenny, announced his candidacy for party leader. He was elected leader of the ruling party just earlier this month. Varadkar's elevation marks a huge milestone that has swept the country of more than 4 million people to decriminalize homosexuality in 1993. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, let's continue our conversation with our guest for tonight. Let me go back to Julie Joseph in Dublin. Julie, I want to ask you, was there any opposition? Was there any kind of resentment, perhaps, or a protest? How was this accepted in Ireland? What was the mood like there, accepting someone who's not only young, the son of immigrants? What was that like there? Julie?
Well, Mr. Varadkar has won by 57 to 50, so that shows in itself that he has met with a very big, opposition before, having this big win, and I think it's but natural when you come from a family, who's not originally Irish, who's half Irish, and only that, this is a country who has been, illegalizing homosexuality until 1993, and this is a predominant Catholic nation, and so there were there were little qualms, there were doubts, there were grievances, and especially among the independents and the opposition party. But the largest population of Ireland is quite hopeful. I mean, they are seeing it as a fresh breath, into Irish politics. And they are very hopeful that this will, help them to get themselves free from the clutches of the problems that has been jostling with for so long, like the Eighth Amendment, which is the problem of abortion, the problem of housing, the problem of not many rights and opportunities for students from immigrant citizens here. So we all are looking forward to what he has to offer to the people, just who are like him and who are looking up a lot to him.
All right. And of course, he's not the only one who's of Indian origin who has managed to grab a seat in politics. Let's now shift focus from Ireland to the UK. The number of Indian origin MPs in Britain actually has just gone up. In fact, just last week during the snap poll election, there were 12 Indian origin British nationals that were elected into the UK Parliament. Take a look at some of these faces. The Labour Party has the highest number of Indian origins, especially when it comes to MPs. Among them, Keith Vaz from Leicester. He's from the longest serving British Asian MP there. Then there's also Valerie Vaz, who represents Walsall South and has been an MP since 2010. We have Seema Malhotra Feltham and Heston. She is a former shadow minister. You also have Virendra Sharma, been an MP since 2007. Another popular one, Tanmanjeet Singh Deshi, who also is known as Tan simply. He got elected this time. It is the first time, in fact, that a turban Sikh MP was elected in Britain's political legislature. And we also have Preet Kaur Gill, Britain's first ever woman who is also Sikh, joining the ranks of the MPs. Shifting now to the Conservatives. Here are the rest of them. We have Suella Fernandez, been an MP from Fareham since 2015. Preeti Patel, a Tory member from Witham since 2010. Alok Sharma, an MP from Reading West, a former minister as well. We have Rishi Sunak, from Richmond, the son-in-law of tech tycoon Narayan Murthy. Shailash Vara from Northwest Cambridgeshire, served under David Cameron. So quite an interesting stack there of folks from the UK. Let's now go to Mandy Clark in London. Mandy, that was quite significant, right? A dozen Indian origin of British nationals being elected there. How important is that, sort of shaping policy going forward, especially for that community?
Well, it is actually quite significant because, some of the candidates you name represent a very Asian orientation population. So it's not surprising that they would have seats. But a lot of the other people do represent, the general British public. And it just shows the level of acceptance that has, on the backdrop of Brexit, we thought maybe we'd see more of a backlash to minorities, but it hasn't proven the case. So it's refreshing and also having them represent areas where they've never represented before, which is largely white British people. It shows there how much there is faith in this group. Of course, Labour has the most Indian origin or Asian origin politicians, and that has always been the party of choice for the minority community because it's slightly left-leaning and it always speaks to inclusiveness. But we do see quite a few conservatives, and it just shows how they are truly integrated in the fabric of society. And I think that is the important takeaway, that very much they might be Asian origin, but they are very much British, and they are seen as British here and by their electorate.
All right, let me go over to Dilip to weigh in on that. The fact that we saw a Sikh for the first time in UK politics, especially if a Sikh woman, I mean, that certainly speaks volumes, perhaps paving the way for a higher position, perhaps even the Prime Minister. I mean, how important are these type of position, these type of election results going forward for the generation ahead?
The kind of global Desi politician that WION is talking about is an example again of real globalization in these countries. There is a pushback, as it were, as populations try to figure out whether they've gone too far.
Right.
But these are politicians who actually represent, in a sense, the way the country has itself evolved. So the Global Desi Politician in the UK represents not just the immigrants who've been there perhaps for generations, but also large sections of the white population who have been there for longer. So I think that's the good sign. And the fact that they are on both sides of the fence rather than just in one party is again healthy. And what you've left out is that there is a very large number of them in the House of Lords. So you're really talking of the upper house and the lower house having large numbers of global Desi politicians who play by British values, have a strong connection with their homelands,
right,
and yet recognize that they are elected for a purpose which is to serve the constituencies where they are. So I think this is a good sign.
I also want to follow up with that. There was a situation, we always talk about, most recently, the story about British Airways. There was a situation where Indians were blamed. Sometimes the minority groups are the easy scapegoat. When you have Indians or South Asians in office in political power that really have the voice, can listen to the people, and can actually implement some of those changes, it certainly carries a lot of weight. It turned out that British Airways, the IT outage was because of a contractor. It had nothing to do with outsourcing or IT jobs at all. So this certainly sort of paves a way for a step in the right direction, having some of these Indian voices in both houses. We talked about the Labour and the Conservatives.
As they say, it's only when you're attacked that you are significant. So the fact that Indian IT was attacked was an acknowledgement in British Airways that, look, they are acknowledged as the place where we would go for outsourcing if we had to. In this case, thankfully, we were not to blame, a contractor was. But when you have a voice locally, which consists of elected representatives in Parliament, they are there to make sure that what starts out as an error does not get magnified into something which turns out into an attack on Indian immigrants or on Indian business interests. And I think that's why WION is doing a great job by focusing on this, because their voice means that India has a higher level of protection for its services and its people.
Well, we appreciate those kind words and certainly that perspective. I think it's important to talk about those things. Let me also go back to Mandy Clark. Mandy, we've been covering many stories in London, perhaps no shortage of stories. It started with, of course, what happened at the Westminster Bridge. Fast forward to Manchester, and then the London terror attacks, of course, the elections, and then this fire. No shortage of stories. What I wanted to ask you is sometimes, sadly, when there are situations like this, especially terror, hate crimes are something that are prevalent. The mayor of London addressed that. And Indians, of course, sometimes people are not sure. They could look like any minority group and are unfortunately targeted. We saw that even after 9/11. How are situations like this when Indians are in politics, in office? How important is that to curb hate crime and racism?
It is. It's very important. It just shows that they make up the complete fabric, and they're the ones speaking out. Also, just at the fire yesterday, the amount of minorities who were there who had just shown up to help. So there were Muslim charity groups, and after the London terror attacks, there were also Muslim groups coming out to pray. So the importance of that counter message. So you have that terror attack, an awful situation, and then you have members of that community that's being maligned out there making themselves visibly seen in the public. You have the mayor of London, who, of course, is of Pakistani descent. He's making it very clear that the terror attacks is not in his religion's name. So you do have powerful voices in the British government, elected officials who represent the minority groups speaking out against this terror attacks, and it really curbs that divided message that a lot of terrorists want to create. They want to say that it is not possible to live in a Western society, and they hate us and we hate them. And when you have members of the community speaking out, helping out, it really does cause a healthy, cohesive society, and that healing process begin. So absolutely, it's important to have them in the House of Commons, in the House of Lords. And Lord Villamoria, who I spoke to just recently, said he, no doubt in a few years, will have a PM of Indian origin.
All right, Mandy. All right, lastly, but certainly not least, of course, we have to go to the land of Chanakya, making a splash in politics on the other side of the Atlantic as well. Of course, we're talking about the United States. Prominent lawyer Preet Bharara has been making the news for directly taking on U.S. President Donald Trump. He claims he was fired for not picking up Trump's phone call. He also suggested that there is enough reason to make an obstruction of justice case against Trump's in the James Comey issue. In fact, many other Indian Americans, too, are making important policy intervention decisions in the U.S. Let's take a look at them real quickly. We have Pramila Jayapal, an MP from the 7th District of Washington. We have Kamala Harris, a senator from California. You have Ami Bera, who represents California for the third time. Ro Khanna, who is from the Silicon Valley. And Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois. Then there are those in Trump's core team, including, of course, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley there. You have Uttam Dhillon, who is with the White House's legal team. Seema Verma, the head of Medicaid and Medicare. And Ajit Pai, who heads the Federal Communications Commission. Let me go back to the leap over here. Indian Americans and Canadians. Let's talk about North America, especially with a Trump America. How important is it to have these voices, these people in power?
These are relatively newer than the generations of people in the United Kingdom. And I think that one needs to see that this is a ceiling which took a longer while to break. But now that it's broken, there's almost a flood, and you'll see the numbers increase. In the last administration also, the number of Indians who were in sensitive positions, whether at the White House or whether in many of the federal agencies, was very large. I have cousins who are at the top of the federal, pecking order, and these are people who've been there for years,
right,
who've benefited from the education provided locally over there,
right,
but who started out in schools here and then went on into positions of greatness. So I think that many of them are first generation or second generation at the most immigrants, and that makes a big difference to the perception of India in the United States. At this point of time, with the Trump administration, their voices are going to be watched and heard more carefully.
All right. And let's also really quickly take a look at some of the GDPs, the Global Desi Politicians, and what exactly they have to say about their Indian heritage. Who said what? First up, Ireland's Leo Varadkar, Ireland's Prime Minister, as we just mentioned, quote, "I know when my father traveled 5,000 miles to build a new home in Ireland, I doubt that he ever dreamed that one day his son would grow up to be its leader. And despite his differences, his son would be judged by his actions, not his identity," end quote. Next, we have Nikki Haley, the U.S. envoy to the United Nations. Here's what she had to say, quote, "I am the daughter of Indian parents where my mom always said, whatever you do, be great at it and make sure people remember you for it. And so my focus is try to do the job as best as I can," end quote. Staying in the U.S., we have Preet Bharara, who is a U.S. attorney recently fired by Donald Trump. He says, quote, "I am an American. I happen to be an Indian American. I'm very proud of my background, my roots, and my heritage. I'm a huge Springsteen fan, and I also listen to Bhangra music, which is kind of Punjabi music." And last but not least, in the UK, Preeti Patel, a British MP, says, quote, "The Indian diaspora in the UK, they're fantastic at keeping this relationship strong and work hard every day to support the UK and India to reach our potential," end quote. Lost quick reactions. We love this segment. We call it Three Final Words. I'm going to go to Mandy Clark. Three final words, Mandy, with regards to this GDP, Global Desi Politicians. What do you have to say?
Okay, three final words. I think it's growing, it's global, and it's a movement.
All right, growing, global, and a movement. Let's go to Jilly. Three final words on what you have to say about India's GDP, the Global Desi Politician.
Well, I'd say to Mr. Varadkar through you that you have been given an opportunity that is nearly impossible to get in Ireland. So make the most of it for you, for the country, and for ourselves, just like you.
All right, appreciate it. And of course, last but not least, Mr. Dilip Cherian, three final words to sum this all up.
My final words would be grab the future.
Grab the future. Very interesting perspectives. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of our guests.
Thank you.
Mr. Dilip Cherian, Jilly Joseph, and of course, our correspondent, Mandy Clark, getting us the very latest. Well, that does it for this special broadcast. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for watching WION World is One News. Have a good night.